Now we'll move on to the second half of our startups. We hear from 4 startups, 2 on human resources and 2 on engaging with partners. And we'll learn a bit about how to do virtual work, working from home work from the next 2 startups you hear. Riff, Beth from Riff Analytics and Ellen from Humanyze. I'm very excited to hear both your talks.
Thanks for having me. I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Riff. Riff comes out of the Human Dynamics Lab run by Sandy Pentland in the Media Lab. And really our job is to use AI to give feedback about how people are working together, and for that to be used to help not just spur behavior change inside of small groups when they're working online, but actually for that all to bubble up to organizational behavior change. So just see if I can move forward. Because of this, everybody's working from home. We all know this. It looks more complicated than that. But really, the reality on the ground is that more people will be working and studying from home and remotely than ever before. And this makes sense. It's been a sort of a movement that's been coming for a long time. I personally have been working from home for 20 years. I know that sounds impossible, but it's true. And really, the emerging generation of workers in the globe, millennials, are also really stating right out loud that they prefer to work from home, and they're natively digital, and there's lots of implications there. So there's a lot of work here to be done, but there's a strong groundswell of interest in making remote work. But meetings in particular are less valuable online. There's this sort of sentiment that the meeting is just something you have to sort of tolerate. We're hoping for it to end. Lots of people mute. There's no camera. There's a culture around that seems insurmountable, and it encourages poor behaviors and unproductive dynamics. So at Riff, what we do is we use technology and AI to help people stay engaged in meetings, and not just to focus attention by providing a video environment that's more feedback oriented, but actually to give real-time feedback about the dynamics of the meeting while it's happening. So the purple ball that you notice here on the graphic that I'm highlighting is a dominance meter, and it moves around in real time as people are speaking and shows who's sort of like hogging the mic, as it were, or who may be more submissive in the conversation, and we give that in real time. We also give interaction dynamics metrics at the end of meetings, and we help people really understand within even a group what all of the pairwise or dyadic conversations look like between each party in the call, and then use that to help become more effective in small teams and work better together on shared tasks, particularly complex tasks that really require there to be a healthy back and forth between all parties. These are the sort of the 3 key metrics. We measure lots of things, but these are the 3 key metrics we have: dominance, how passive or active you are; influence, which is really about who you're keying off of in meetings; and interruption and affirmation, some of which can be very encouraging to the flow of a conversation, and some of which can be very disruptive, and we separate those 2 things. Our partners right now are mostly in learning and development, and we focus there because this is a developmental activity. You're learning how to work more effectively together. You're learning how to be part of groups that need to collaborate and that work on complex problems. So you'll see that our clients really focus on leadership development in particular, but also technical business skills is a big area of because the problems are complex, we focus there. We have just one highlighted use case here from Grant Thornton. They have a program where all their managers go through leadership training to improve their interpersonal skills. And for them, the job to be done is to learn how to leverage the expertise of the entire organization. The firm's job is to provide the best service that they can to their customers, and an individual sort of consultant or account manager cannot do that alone. And so they're teaching all their top line managers how to really learn what their dynamics are with respect to other people in the organization, and then to change toward more collaborative behaviors over time. where we hope to partner large-scale organizations with a training emphasis or a developmental emphasis. We think that's in high-growth engineering companies, consulting firms, and even corporate executive developmental programs like some of the ones that I highlighted. And here we're really focused on upskilling and reskilling in a very specific domain, which is all around leadership and management development and making people be more effective, particularly when they're working in online remote ways and you cannot always key off the signals that you get from people standing in front of you. We're running a free promotion right now for anybody who wants to try out what we're using, what we're doing, and give it a shot themselves. And then you can see those real-time dynamics of conversations yourself by using the software.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me here today. I'm Ellen Nussbaum. I'm the CEO of Humanyze, which was born out of the MIT Media Lab. And our vision is to make work better and more productive. So just going back to organizational health, and it's a big problem, whether you're measuring that in the cost of losing employees and the productivity that goes with them, or just more broadly, the productivity associated with disengaged employees. It's over $1 trillion a year in the US alone. So the question is, well, why is that? Why don't companies address the problem? And it's because they really have a hard time pinpointing exactly where and exactly how big these problems are. It's been one of those subjective, squishy management by walking around in terms of assessing how hard people are working and are they engaged and so forth. But what Humanyze has built is a set of tools that allow companies to, with existing corporate data, really understand which teams are collaborating well and which teams are struggling to work together, where employees are overworked, where they're underworked. What's the impact of COVID-19 and everybody working from home? How is that changing the dynamic? And then as companies start to bring employees back into the office, how should I think about that? Which employees should come back when? Is it important which groups come back together? How can I use this data to make better business decisions? So again, what Humanyze does is we really focus on existing corporate data, most of which is communication data. So you can learn a lot about collaboration if you understand how people are communicating, who they're communicating with, what are they doing, which meetings are they in, and so forth. And you can use that to answer questions like, how much time is being spent in meetings? Do people have focused time to get their work done, or are they in 9 to 5 meetings, or in fact longer? Are they engaged in the meetings, or are they multitasking? You know, we can see that they're sending emails at the same time that they're on a web conference. So how engaged are they in the meeting and so forth? And specifically, how's that changed in the last couple of months with everybody's work patterns thrown off? So really the fundamental thing is to take data that's already there and better understand it so you can make targeted changes. Now, one thing that's really important is we're very focused on data privacy. We don't take individual or PII data. We don't care whether John is spending too much time on Twitter and Susie's checking her Facebook during the day. We're really focusing on the team and the collaboration side. So it's anonymized data. And we also don't take content. So it's not what the conversation is about. It's just about, are people working together, and are they working together in the same way over time, and so forth. So, one question I get asked a lot is, this all sounds interesting, but what do I do with this? Like, why do customers come to Humanyze? And for us, there's been 2 primary use cases. One has been real estate, and the real estate buyer wants to understand how the physical workspace is being used, where people are working. Do I have the right space? Do I have people seated next to each other the way they should be? And then the HR department really wants to understand culture and employee burnout and the things you can't quite get out of a survey. Both of those teams now are really focused on the return to work and the return to office. So those tend to be who we engage with and the type of questions we answer. We use that and then populate an organizational health dashboard. So giving quantified metrics around employee engagement, team productivity, and organizational adaptability. And then you can double click. You can say, gee, I can see my engagement level isn't that high. Which areas are there particular geographies, particular teams, particular divisions, functions, maybe even one floor that there's dynamics going on that we want to get after. So to really help quantify and trend and benchmark what good looks like and what we're going to try and focus on.
Thank you, Ellen. Can we wrap it up a bit to make sure we have time for the other speakers?
Okay, apologies. So, long way of saying it's a data-driven way of quantifying org health. And what's next for us? We are currently raising capital to expand our go-to-market, and then also if would look for other companies to partner with, specifically HR and real estate executives at companies that have 250 or more knowledge workers is typically where we play. So apologies for the tech startup challenges, and thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. So my name is Katya. I'm a class of 2013 bachelor's grad in nuclear and a Gordon Engineering Leadership Scholar as well. So presenting to you today, centrally, AI for business opportunity discovery. So it probably feels like a while back. Last time you were at a big conference, hundreds, if not thousands of people, with the hope deep inside that I really hope to meet just the right person here for my next business opportunity. Nowadays, that's probably scrolling through the participants list on your Zoom meeting, hoping that you're going to find just that right, perfect person. Or remember that time when you spent hours digging up as much information as you could about a specific company that you were interested in acquiring or investing in, or trying to find all the top energy storage startups, for example. And then that one time when you bumped into just the perfect person in an elevator. Wouldn't it be awesome if those unique opportunities were a little bit more systematized and a little bit more frequent than they are now? So discovering these key new business opportunities is really hard. Today, it's a very manual process. We have so many different sources, in-person connections, market research data, cold searching online. It's a lot of times out of context. You don't really see the bigger picture of the market landscape. So a lot of these opportunities are left to chance. My background's in nuclear, renewables, robotics, higher education in the US, Russia, Switzerland, India. It's so disappointing to see so many of these technologies not reaching their full potential and impact because the right connections are not made. So presenting to you centrally, your tool for discovering business opportunities in a little bit more systematized way. So there's 4 layers to our technology. Obviously, the base is a database. So we have 2 main buckets. One is information about nodes or the companies, startups, organizations, and where they're located, what their industry is, role. And then the other part are the relationships. So it's not just who invested in whom, but joint ventures, customers, distributors, etc. Sources, various open source information online, and we do a thorough search for it, as well as the customer's CRM, for example. Next level up is because we label the data, the users can do a targeted search for what they're looking for. So by tag, by a not just energy company, but energy storage, specifically energy storage flow battery concept, for example. Next level is the visualization. I love lists, I love my Excel, but there are things that Excel just can't do. You really miss the context of the relationships of the entries in the file. So what we present is a graph view where you can see, oh, interesting, 3 out of the 4 of my competitors actually work with the same distributor. The last layer is that recommendation system. So looking at the user's past search history or similar companies and what has worked and not worked for them, we're building out that recommendation system of what works and what does not work. So customer use case, tech transfer firm out of Europe. They're seeking some specific clean tech technologies in specific regions. So their challenge is, A, oh my gosh, I need to find hundreds, if not thousands of options. There's a little bit of fear of missing out of that super awesome technology. And then 2, filtering that down to tens of options using specific criteria. So that's really the sweet spot that we found where the problem is so complex and identifying those options. So partnership ask, we're looking for early stage companies. Specifically, they're looking for the new innovation or technologies in quickly developing industries. Worked in energy, IoT, esports. And then 2, really your feedback. What has worked for you in partnership or new technology acquisition, and what has not? Where are the challenges? From Katya, from Centrally, thanks for listening.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Stuart Jones. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sigma Ratings. I'm a MIT Sloan graduate 2017. Along with my co-founder, Gabrielle Haddad, who also graduated in the same year. We actually closed our first global client while we were still students, so it's good to be back. Again, we're Sigma Ratings, and we help our clients transact with confidence. So financial crime is a big global problem. 2 to 5% of GDP is laundered on a global basis. You heard me right, 2 to 5% of global GDP is laundered. And this presents major problems and challenges for corporations and financial institutions that are trying to work in a global interconnected world by trying to stay active on one hand and trying to stay regulatorily compliant on the other. In fact, the biggest problem is that 80% of the data that they need to make the right decisions sits outside of the organization. And it makes it very difficult for them to get, which leads to enormous overhead and enormous armies of people trying to go out and find that information. In fact, 10 to 15% of a global corporation or financial institution's workforce is now dedicated to compliance, which represents $250 billion of spend on financial crime compliance year over year. And this has caught the attention of boards, and rightfully so. Boards are concerned about two things. They're concerned about spiraling compliance costs, but they're also concerned about missing risk that might lead to reputational damage and might be hiding in plain sight. Enter Sigma Ratings. We help untangle this mess, and we help bring everything that you need together into one place, into one single intelligence feed that allows a user to know what they need to know about any counterparty in near real time. The way that we do this is several things. First is deep domain expertise. I started my career at the US Treasury Department in the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. My co-founder is an M&A lawyer, and we've surrounded ourselves with technologists that are making something possible that probably wasn't 4 or 5 years ago. In addition to that, we have a number of databases under licensing. We collect and harvest our own data and put it into our intelligence database. And then finally, we stitch all of this together using AI and machine learning to not only link all of this data together to make sense, but to also link it to our clients. We provide our data in 3 ways: via API, via secure file transfer, and also via our web-based application that we would love to show you called Terminal. In terms of traction, we're live in global banks. We're live in professional services firms, as well as broker-dealers, and even in governments. And our clients are using our platform for 2 key reasons. The first is to screen or search any company that they might want to work with and get back in near real time in under 30 seconds any risk flag that our model is able to detect across the data we have integrated. The second is the ability to monitor clients on an ongoing basis. The use case there is really around institutions that are trying to keep track of their clients from a compliance perspective, from a business perspective, or even from credit teams that are increasingly approaching us and saying this can be a very viable early warning system. Today, we monitor for different clients, hundreds, thousands, and even millions of entities on an ongoing basis. We're super excited again to be here. We'd love to find out how we could partner with you. I think the next step is a demo. We're interested in working with financial institutions, global corporates that have global supply chains that need to understand and monitor counterparty risk, as well as insurance providers that are potentially interested in how our data could help them. Again, my name is Stuart. You can find me at stuart@sigmaratings.com, or you can find out more at www.sigmaratings.com. Thank you again.
All right, now we have our panelists. Please do turn on your mic. Yes, so we can all hear you. Great. I hope to have a lively panel talking about the different thoughts on HR, working from home, as well as partnership. Let's kick it off with the Beth and Ellen first. Working from home, what are you seeing, right? I think your talk already covered some of these aspects, but I'd love to go in a little more depth, just help us understand this new reality, this new normal we're struggling with, how to work from home. I mean, I hear your talk at Beth, I'm like, I would love to see that in my team meeting in terms of who's speaking more. So take it away.
If I could start real quick there. Yeah, what we're noticing is that people really want to be able to understand more about the dynamics of their working from home setups. It's not going to be true for every single meeting that you have online, that a set of really highly interactive and dynamic feedback is going to be appropriate, because sometimes you're just listening, right? You're on a phone call, you're on a meeting, you're in a broadcast mode like this one, you're listening, you're trying to get new information, and then you can have some lighter weight engagement. But for small teams that are meeting to do productive, complex work together, it is easy to lose sight of the quieter voices in the room, virtual room. And it's also easy to get caught in the trap of listening and or talking and not listening. So these are just lightweight feedback that allow people to just be a little bit more conscientious with objective measure associated with it, so that their own biased view of what may be happening, unconscious though it may be, doesn't overly affect the interaction dynamics of the group, and it leads to more fruitful discussion. So when we get feedback from people, they're like, "I want more. Give me more metrics. It's not enough. I want to know more about myself." So once you get the interest in that, it sort of feeds on itself.
I like that. If it's if we're all to focus on what we're doing and lacking a little awareness, self-awareness, now there's software that can help you get to that awareness.
Exactly.
Yeah, Ellen, your thoughts on measuring organizational health from these interactions?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're not as focused on the individual. We're focused on the team and the dynamics. And what we've seen, and the data has borne this out, is at the beginning there was actually, we expected, is productivity going to tank? What's going to happen? And productivity was actually quite resilient at the first. People adapted quite quickly, and it's maintained a pretty high level at most organizations. But what we're also starting to see is three different factors going on. One is there's Zoom fatigue. So what was working out for a while has lost its novelty. Two is, as companies start to reopen the office, there's this hybrid model. Some are going back, some aren't. And that's actually a lot harder than when everybody is in the same boat and everybody's working from home. And I think three is, and we'll know more, be able to quantify this over time, this is a hypothesis, but really that loss of incidental contact, the people you meet in the hallway, the relationships that you build from seeing people and chatting at the water cooler, we feel like the loss of that has potential for long-term serious impact, both on productivity, employee engagement, and just resiliency of the organization. So I worry a little bit when I see companies say, "Hey, you like working at home? You can stay at home forever." I think it's really a little bit too early to decide whether, it's in long-term in the employee's best interest to say everybody is at home or in the organization's best interest. I think this hybrid model will persist, but we're just really learning what it means for the employee and what it means for the organization.
Yeah, and I'll pick up on what Ellen's saying there, that I think the intentionality of the approach is really important, right? It's not just, hey, anything goes. We'll just let them, anybody who wants to work from home can, no problem. It'll all work out. It definitely will not all work out, right? There's a lot of work to be done to really make working from home effective. And having a measurement or a data-oriented approach is really a key part of making it something that can be effective for both the individual, which is what a lot of working from home is all about. People who are early work from home, they're like, well, I did it because it was a matter of personal convenience or, challenge for me, and I had to make that work. And now it's really an organizational challenge for every organization that's trying to figure out what's the right approach and how can I know whether it's working or not. And you have to really take a data-driven. It can't just be sentiment. It has to be data-driven.
Well said. I do want to just push a bit, like on a question that was asked, who do you sell to? What's the value prop? I think it's just I think it's more like when we hear it, we're like, wow, obviously we want that, but like, how do you make it out of business out of that? Such, like who in the organization will own that? I know you might have answered it in the chat. I want to make sure everybody, there are others probably that didn't get a chance to, see that.
Yeah, well, we always sell into learning and development or part of the organization because it really is a developmental tool first and foremost. What we worry about is that people will get feedback and won't really know what to do with it. And so we want to start there and make sure we really understand what feedback has the best effect and can really affect the best behavior change coupled with productivity or performance change. We want, obviously, just generally, it's good for culture to have more respectful dialogue, to listen more than you speak if that's the appropriate role for you, and all those good things. But really, the bottom line for organizations is it making my teams more effective and more productive? Do they feel good, and are we getting the work done? And there, we feel like we need to start in learning and development, where the learning happens first, the development is ongoing, and then we can bring it in as a tool later on for the whole organization.
Yeah, very good. I found it interesting. Like earlier the week, we had a speaker talking about the human side of digital transformation. It's part of the digital transformation series. And right before the startups, we had Michael Davies talking about what can we learn from the technology companies, or many of you guys here are doing exactly that. So I think it's interesting adapting and becoming more nimble, becoming more a self-reflective company, and it's great to have also some solutions, technology solutions for that. I do want to mention also what I hear a lot, even from startups, but also corporates, is this idea about today, that being where we are, diversity. It's so important, racial diversity, gender diversity, and we know first of all, it's great we have so many women panelists here with us today. So how do we encourage more of that, speaking up from folks that traditionally might be a little more quiet? Beth, Ellen, any thoughts on that diversity?
Yeah, I'll let Ellen go because I've been speaking a lot.
Well, so with us, it wouldn't be about are they speaking enough and so forth, but we actually could use our technology to understand, are they part of the conversation? So if companies can provide for us, again, it's anonymized, we don't care that it's Beth or Rebecca, but if we can get information like gender, like race, like age, tenure, and so forth, to the extent that people provide that, we can really give insights on that. And we can see, is any particular group being excluded from the conversation? Is any particular group working longer hours than another, and so forth? So this is actually an active conversation we're having at Humanized to say, we know that technology can help to answer these questions and make sure that if companies don't know that there's bias going on, that we could surface it for them so that they can address it.
And we take a slightly different approach, but a companionable one, which is that we're also privacy preserving. We don't collect demographic data or anything like that, and we don't know who the speakers are. But one of the sort of central tenets is, because the feedback that we give real time is collective, that means that everybody sees the same thing. It becomes less a responsibility of any individual to change their behavior, although we encourage that through the metrics that we provide after the meeting, as it does the collective responsibility of a group to make sure that there is a balanced, even respectful conversation that everybody can be welcomed into. And in that group by group, person by person, in that small way, that collective feedback, it's like, you can't deny it. It's right there. It's in front of everybody, and anybody can act on it. So it becomes less a single person who's like, hey, I got to fight for my share, than it is a group responsibility.
Thank you for that, Beth. I saw a comment from the Q&A, which I thought was interesting. They're like, it would be great if this could work in person as well, in terms of dynamics, because that's happening a lot. So maybe that's your
hard. It's really hard. We do.
A future product direction for you to think about. Great. Now I want to shift gear a bit to Katia and Stuart, talking a bit about partnerships. For you guys, it's also about using data and helping with this decision making, but on a different angle. So Katia, Stuart, how do you get the data in to help you your customer get the insights they need?
I can start. Yes, I think that, as in the previous panel as well, there's so much data out there, and it's a question of how do you make sense of the data. Certainly with advanced machine learning, there's ways to tag the data, there's ways to sort of filter through the data to find what's relevant to you and not. So because our sources come from so many different, PDFs, news articles, social media posts, you really need to find ways to systematize it well and really pull out the kernels to keep in the database. So it's an exciting puzzle, but becoming more and more feasible with current technology.
I think from our perspective, in the beginning, we felt like we needed to go and build all of this data ourselves. And where we've sort of landed is that we can build pieces of it ourselves, but there's also quite a lot out there that can be licensed that isn't being used and applied to our domain. And if you can bring that in alongside what you're able to collect on your own, then you can start to hash across it, and you can start to resolve entities, and you can start to get better at presenting a user with what they really want to know. In our business, the biggest problem really is getting to the resolved entity that a user is looking for. So if it's a generic name, that's a very hard and complicated problem. But the more data that you're able to bring together at the same time, the easier and more likely it is that you can point the user in the right direction so that they understand that they are doing business with a certain supplier in a foreign country. It is the one that they're looking for, and they have validated and verified that that entity is not on a watch list, is not in an adverse news article, is not under some sort of legal embattlement, and can feel confident to move forward with a decision. And so it's really a combination of things that come together to form what I probably unscientifically describe as a layer cake of data that is necessary to ultimately get to an answer.
Well, what I find interesting, Stuart, about both your solution and Katya is it's stuff people do today already, but they do it kind of in a manual ad hoc way, right? Like manually ad hoc way, we try to figure out if we are getting to all the partnership, the right collaborators, or manually we're trying to figure out are there risks involved. So what are some of the challenges you go in to convince people, hey, instead of doing this the way you've always done it manually, let's move it to this more scaled up, systematic, using data-driven way? Do you find it easy to convince folks, hard to convince people? Are there some people who are ready to jump right away? And if so, whom? Tell me a bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, good question. This is something that definitely comes up with interviews, especially with sort of larger companies or types of firms where things have always been done by recommendation. Hey, I always ask, my buddies to tell me what the best startups in this field are. And I think people just historically have been so attached with, feeling like they have a big network and that a lot of this connection needs to happen in person, and this discovery needs to come from a recommended source, which now with globalization and with complex, sales and just ecosystems, that's no longer the most optimal case. So I think the people that are ready to change are the ones that are just way too overwhelmed with the options, or really go through the grind on a daily basis of pulling this information, and they're ready to move because they realize that this is not the most optimal way. The others we'll get to later.
I would sort of build onto that and say, and sort of take it in two directions quickly. One is, I think we have to sort of recognize and own up to the fact that the world has changed, and COVID-19 has changed the way we think, we operate. The earlier panelists, I think, pointed that out very, very well. But that also translates into how we do diligence and how we make decisions on who we work with. We used to get on a plane and fly to London for a cup of tea, to close a deal or to look someone in the eye to make a decision. And that's just not as feasible today as it was, nor will it maybe be ever again. So I think that the leveraging of technology is speeding up by a decade a lot of the things that were business as usual pre-COVID-19, and I think are very real to keep in mind. I think the second is that in our industry specifically, there are a lot of manual tasks. The number one tool for due diligence today is Google. And the problem with that is Google wasn't purpose-built for that. And so what you end up with is, global banks and corporations searching in Google, hoping to find an answer, or using Google Alerts to try to keep up with changes in their client base, and it's just not fit for purpose. So I think that manual searching within Google is moving leaders to make a much faster decision on if this really works and you can save me 30%. We're living in a low interest environment for the foreseeable future. I'm interested.
One more thing to add on to there. The interesting thing with social dynamics is when you search on Google or news, eventually you build a biased recommendation system, and even just in your own personal networks. So you end up just looking in your small little community, which I definitely saw in the nuclear industry. It's a great industry, but you end up just sticking around and just hearing the same ideas. It's really hard to break out of Google's algorithm to get inspired and change that bias of what you're looking for. And those are really the sweetest opportunities.
That's such a great point.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, I can definitely see that being an issue. We have a couple, another question for Beth and Alan. This is playing a bit of a devil's advocate. At what point does reliance on AI to evaluate behavior, does that dehumanize the workplace? Is that something you hear from the customers? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just answering it by text, but I'll answer it now live. We really steer clear of anything that's proscriptive at all. We don't want to say something is a priori right or something is a priori wrong as a behavior. What we really want is an augmented solution, right? One where you may have instinctive awareness, less or more, depending on how socially sensitive you are about what's happening in an environment, a group environment. And you may or may not have blind spots around certain people or certain scenarios or certain topics. And so the data augments what you can know yourself and gives you an objective view of what happened that you can pair with your own perspective on what happens in the media. So we aren't looking to replace what should be sort of a set of instincts and behaviors that you learn through interaction, but to augment it and give you something that you may not see yourself.
Yeah, and I would say similarly, there is no cookie cutter approach to, if we see this, you should do that. What we will do is provide benchmarks, which is to say, high performing teams typically spend this much time in meetings or allow this much time for focused time, or employee engagement is higher when they have a network that's at least a certain number of people, right? If you get out of your little silo and you work with people in different parts of the organization. So it's definitely not about saying, hey, Rebecca only talks to 6 people a day and you need to get that to 8 or you're not going to, but it's really about helping people to understand in that organization what correlates with high performance, what correlates with low attrition, and what are the things that, again, within the environment, because there is context that matters, have been demonstrated to make it a better workplace. And that's really what this is about, is trying to make the workplace better for people.
Yeah, totally agree, Ellen. That's great.
Great. I want to wrap up the panel now by asking our audience to follow-up question. Does the poll, could you read that third poll, which of the startups would you like to follow up with, and we'll try to connect you with the startups. But from our panelists, any last thought for our corporate audience on, there's a lot of information they're absorbing today in a short time. What are some of the takeaways you want folks to walk away with? Anyone feel free to jump in and start this.
I'll jump in because I went first anyway. I'll just say that, one of the things that we really hope that people walk away from is a sort of a budding awareness of how online is not a slam dunk. It's something you have to work at. It's very intentional practice, and it is best done when you're thinking about it and when you're really trying to be respectful of everybody's ways of working. And the more intentional you can be, the better it'll go.
I guess for me, one of the things that I found interesting from listening to all the speakers is just that a lot of these decisions used to be very subjective, right? And it used to be gut feel, and I've managed for a long time, and this is what works. And I think it's just really exciting to see how you can use data to make better business decisions. And, again, whether it's Humanyze or any of the other folks on the panel, I think that to me is just a really exciting evolution in HR, is how data can really change the workplace and transform people's work lives.
Yeah, it was interesting, sort of the insight, I guess, hearing this panel discussion was that bias within the workplace, by not sort of seeing the trends and the information, just sticking to what sort of really resonates with what Centrally is working on, with really trying to democratize, like, which technologies can you find and who do you choose to work with that aren't just in your immediate circle that you've always worked with, but really using data for that discovery.
Yeah, and just maybe to build onto that, I would just sort of double click on just how much different and how much more complicated business is going to be, post COVID-19, and again, how that can be used to understand not only counterparties, but to understand networks, because ultimately you have to understand the network around an entity that you're looking at, and really the fact that there's just so much out there that you can leverage and harness and bring in. And we feel like we might have like 2% of what's out there, but working together with bigger corporations that are facing these challenges. I think bringing that together in a new and more complete way is not only going to help firms manage risk in this new environment, but also open new opportunities that they might have not looked into before.
I want to say thank you so much for our panelists. A lot of wisdom here, and you're right. This is the world's more complex after COVID-19. So I hope that there's some interesting thoughts here for our audience to take away with. And if you want to connect with the startups, to answer the poll or use that spreadsheet, use that URL I mentioned earlier, bit.ly/management startups 2020, big M, big S. Thank you, everyone.